Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, amidst the escalating tensions in the Middle East, US President Donald Trump spoke with Prime Minister Narendra Modi over a phone call, with both leaders stressing the need to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. In a post on social media platform X, Prime Minister Modi said that he had a useful exchange with the US President and emphasized that India supports de-escalation and the early restoration of peace, stressing that keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, secure and accessible is vital for global stability. Viewers, this is the first time both leaders have spoken directly since the war began. And one thing is clear, the US President is now feeling the jitters from the war that Iran says he started. Just yesterday, Trump announced that he held talks with Iran and halted any attack on the country for 5 days. But Iran immediately refuted those claims and vowed to fight back. They've now appointed a person called Mohammad Bagher Zolghadar as the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council after the death of Ali Larijani. Let's tell you more about this particular individual and why this appointment is being seen as very significant. Is this the sign of a militarized regime next in Iran? Well, we're looking at what experts are saying. They're saying that the IRGC has been absorbing the core nodes of decision-making within the regime itself. The space for diplomatic flexibility becomes that much thinner, is what some of them have noted. They also say that Iran, or particularly this individual, is a former deputy commander of the IRGC itself. And they've also, of course, gone on to add that he's a person who's now going to play a very, very important role in this entire regime. This is, of course, as far as Mohammad Zolghadar is concerned, significant that he has been playing an important role in the IRGC. Let's quickly, in fact, tell you also about what really is the impact, in fact, the rise of Zolghadar, who has raised a lot of eyebrows. In fact, in 2007, he was appointed the Deputy Chief of General Staff. He's also, of course, the implication is that Iran is signaling that it is not ready to back down. There's also, of course, the implication of the future negotiations becoming difficult. There's also a sign that it's not clearly going to back down as far as this is concerned, and it may shift towards a militarized regime. The future of the defense and nuclear policies is also going to perhaps be decided by this individual. Also gives the IRGC a more powerful role in Iran. Now, the IRGC's influence in Iran has been growing for decades. But the midst of the war, as well as the killing of Ali Khamenei, as well as the installation of Mujtaba Khamenei, they've now assumed an even more central role in strategic decision-making. And with the new security chief in place, it's expected to grow. Let's understand how IRGC influences leadership in Iran. There's clearly a political influence because they have strong ties with factions in parliament as well as the judiciary. They can support or block presidential and parliamentary candidates as well. It's also very important that advisory role on security, foreign policy and domestic stability as well, and can sway the assembly of experts, which in fact chooses the supreme leader, as we've seen just a few weeks ago. There's also military leverage because it controls key military and security forces. It shapes the strategic decisions and succession. It also ensures that leaders follow the IRGC's priorities and the succession in terms of keeping the line of replacements ready for each commander in the mosaic structure of defense. Therefore, it can withstand the loss of leadership, given that there are 31 separate commands which each have their own hierarchy of leadership. Now, what happens when the country expects its generals to be killed, as we're seeing at this point of time, the command centers to be bombed and the communications to be disrupted, and still plans to keep fighting? That's the question that lies at the heart of Iran's so-called mosaic defense doctrine, which is a decentralized war strategy designed to ensure that the state can absorb devastatingly early strikes and continue operating. Under this model, the authority and decision-making are spread across many regional units rather than concentrated in a single command center, as we see in many other countries. So if one node is destroyed here, others keep functioning and the war effort endures. Now, what really are we looking at in terms of the big names that are left in Iran now? The Revolutionary Guards head, Ahmad Vahidi. There's also the Revolutionary Guards Quds Force Chief, Ismail Khani. There's the Revolutionary Guards Naval Head, Ali Reza Tangsiri. There's a Parliament Speaker, Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf, there's a President Masoud Pezeshkian, as well as the former Supreme National Security Chief Saeed Jalili. The Guardian Council member Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi is also there, and the Foreign Minister, of course, who we've been seeing quite vocal, Abbas Araghchi as well. Debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let's take this across to our guest now joining us. Sushant Sareen, a senior fellow of ORF. Also with us is Dr. Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh, who's a director of the House of Diplomacy, House Iran. We also have with us Ambassador Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, who's a former US diplomat. So let's quickly take this across to our guests. And let me begin with Ambassador Jeffrey Gunter. Ambassador Jeffrey Gunter, the sense now, and it's quite clear, that the way the National Security Council there in Iran is headed, the very fact that it's a former Brigadier General of the IRGC, is that there's going to be a more militarized thought process as far as the entire security structure and the decision making as far as Iran is concerned. Now, the big question is, by killing off so many individuals, including Mr. Larjani, who is more in favor of negotiations than a militarized approach, like the current person has the US, in a sense, made the regime that much more militaristic in its thinking and its policy making?
It's a great question, and thank you for having me on the show with your great panel. Let's be honest. If when I was on your guys' show 2 days ago, we would never thought that we'd be at the point now where America is negotiating in Iran in a settlement in the Middle East. And the reason why we're able to do that is, believe it or not, peace through strength. We thoroughly eliminated the majority of the leadership in Iran. And really what's happened here is individuals want to stay alive. They want to prosper, and they want to stay in power. And in order for them to do that, President Trump has showed them that they have to negotiate, and they have to relinquish any nuclear capabilities, any aggressive activities. And it looks like President Trump is doing a phenomenal job of that. And it's really the art of the deal on steroids. That's really what it is. You take a very aggressive position, you eliminate fanatical terrorist so-called leaders like the supreme leader, who's not a leader at all, and you whittle away at them until eventually you have someone who wants to make a deal.
Well, if they're terrorists, then Dr. Gunter, why are you talking to them? If it's a terrorist regime, then why are you engaging them?
Oh, it's brilliant. If you don't talk to people, you're never going to solve anything. And the whole concept.
But the point of them being terrorists are certainly not people you'd want to negotiate with. Right. You'll want a military action on people who are terrorists. But the very fact that the regime exists, the very fact that US has realized that they perhaps bitten off more than they can chew, just goes to show the inherent contradictions and the fact that it wasn't well thought out at all on US's part.
Well, the supreme leader, Ayatollah, who no longer exists on this planet, strongly disagrees with you that President Trump bit off more than he can chew. And the same goes for the rest of their terrorist organization. The reality is, if you want to reach a negotiated settlement, you have to speak with people. And President Trump has never been fearful of speaking with people, whether it's Xi, whether it's Putin, whether it's anyone else. And it's called peace through strength. And I can promise you, anyone who continues to pursue nuclear weapons in Iran or slaughters their own people to the tune of 35 or 40,000 people, they will also meet their predetermined destiny as well. Remember, these guys are terrorist thugs who want everyone else to get the 77 virgins, whereas they will all want to die of old age.
All right, let's quickly bring in other panelists as well. We have Dr. Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh. Dr. Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh, do you agree with that contention of the former US ambassador, Dr. Jeffrey Gunter? Because he says that it's all because of the regime, a terrorist regime, and this is an attempt at arriving at peace. What has been achieved, of course, is another question. But your response to what's happening, because you see the fighting go on today, despite these peaceful overtures, is Iran not in a position, doesn't it want to de-escalate? What are we looking at?
I really like the way that the Trump supporters are talking from another planet, actually. The only part that I would agree with Mr. Ambassador is peace through strength. That is what Iran is doing right now. is actually Iran showing a strength to the Americans and to the world and to the Israelis, of course. And that's why they are now discussing some negotiations and they're asking for talks. The point is that they are moving the goalposts. At the very beginning, they said that they're going to make the Netanyahu.
Yeah.
That will destroy Iranian missile capabilities, nuclear capabilities. They have for several times obliterated everything, and again, they are obliterating everything. He claims that they have obliterated the regime, as they call it, and they are now asking for negotiations with the same regime. So they are just moving the coast to make some achievements, to find something that they claim that they have made something achieved. The point is that Iran has shown a strength, and Iran has proved to the world that geography has some role in this between, and Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz, and this is a strategic strait, and global economy is connected to the Iranian security. So if you want a secure global economy and secure this strait, you need to satisfy Iran. And you need to
let me bring in now Adrian Calamel, who's a fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute of Terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar. Adrian, the question that many are asking, and you would have seen the commentary that's happening already, is this yet another taco moment? Trump always chickens out, because the manner in which there was so much of belligerent narrative just a few days ago to the manner in which the narrative has completely changed, and Iran doesn't seem to be biting.
No, I think quite the opposite. I think we're looking at the United States and Israel, our partner in this. We had a defined set of targets that was going to take roughly about 8 weeks. We're about 4 weeks into it. Every battle plan never survives contact, and that's what every military planner will tell you. But this one has gone exceedingly well as far as ballistic missiles, taking them out. The launchers taking them out, drones sinking 140 different naval bases, the taking out of Ali Khamenei, the taking out of Ali Larijani. These individuals who have had 40 years, like Larijani, you talked about him as being a pragmatic individual. He's anything but. He's just as bloodthirsty as the next individual, and he's got more power. So the United States has consistently degraded both the personnel and
but
the
Adrian, if I can just cross-question you on that for a moment.
Let me finish for a second. Let me finish for a second.
Yeah, no, but Larijani has been replaced by a far more militaristic individual.
This guy is no more. Once you get to a certain level, you clear it. Let me frame it like this: when they took out Qasem Soleimani, that's a person, a key individual, the glue that holds together certain structures, such as the Quds Force and the proxies. Ismail Khani is nothing. He doesn't even compare, and he's even being accused of being a spy. So when you take out individuals like Larijani or Zolgadar or Galibaf, who may be on next up, eventually the bench is weakened, it's thinned out, and you have all the other individuals that sit underneath this structure, this IRG structure that controls 70, 80% of the economy. The individuals have been told to go out in the streets, kill 30,000 people for our bosses who are sending their kids to school in America. Larijani's daughter was teaching at a school in America. So, there's discontent within the guards. And we also have to look at the Artesh. They haven't been touched. There's a day after plan. This is a pause. This is looking at the Strait of Hormuz. This is talking to other individuals, other partners in the region to figure that out. And then also to figure out, make sure we have a plan in place so when the Houthis act up, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait doesn't get closed.
Okay, let me bring in Sushant Sareen on that note. Sushant Sareen, the US continues to say that its campaign is going very well, that it's been able to take out a lot of capacity. Of course, a lot of senior leaders that undoubtedly have been taken out. But what really is the strategy? Is there a cohesive strategy over here? And is this entire strategy pushing Iran towards a more militaristic approach in terms of their entire leadership? Is that what we're looking at, rather than the individuals who are perhaps a little more in terms of sort of in favor of negotiations and talks, rather than those who are perhaps more hardline now?
Madhav, the Americans are certainly claiming that they are working as per their strategy and their strategy is working. But for people like us who are bystanders, who are observers, it doesn't look like that way. It doesn't look that's happening. And at least the public perception is that the Iranians have fought back. Look, I don't have to agree with the regime in Iran or not, but I'm just speaking purely from what we are seeing sitting out here, that they have managed to pull out cards from their chest, which nobody had really expected them to use. And they have used that to great effect. They have created a problem for the rest of the globe. And frankly, I can begrudge them that, but frankly, why would they not use those cards if they are fighting for not just regime survival, but by some accounts for state survival? And the fact is that when the Americans say that, okay, now we are almost ready to start talks. Listen, even if supposing you've already declared that you think that there are divisions within the IRGC ranks, within the Iranian establishment, and there will be some people who will be willing to do a deal with you, then if you have to do a deal, you have to do it on the quiet. Now, the moment you start announcing it publicly, obviously it means you're trying to question the bona fides or at least sow doubts about a particular person inside Iran. When you name, for example, the Speaker of the Parliament or somebody else, you are literally giving him the kiss of death. Maybe that's the intention. That you don't want to take him out, you want somebody else to take him out from within. I don't think the Iranians are going to fall for it. But what kind of negotiations are we talking about when you're not even clear whom you're negotiating with, what the negotiations are all about, and whether those negotiations will lead to anything substantive?
Okay.
Frankly, what the situation, from what we are hearing right now, they're saying that Iran should give up nuclear weapons, but Iran was pretty close to coming to that particular agreement in Geneva. That's published literature. That's what everybody is saying. And yet you reneged on that particular deal. Straits of Hormuz were open before the bombing started. Now you say that reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What is the incentive for Iran to reopen it? You've already caused a lot of death and destruction in Iran. What is the incentive for them to back off right now when they think, and many people else in the Islamic world and the wider world think, that Iran has given back as good as it has got?
Okay.
And it's holding some major cards, and nobody really has a solution to how to sort this out.
Let me get in our guest from Israel, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who's an Israeli defense expert. Lieutenant Colonel Kedar, what really will have Iran have obtained if there is a peace process, if there is a de-escalation? Because the point is, yes, Israel also has its concerns. It will want security guarantees. But what about countries like Iran? What would be this possible exit ramp or the off-ramp that can possibly be offered to them? Because their demands are many, including US bases in the entire Middle East being removed.
Well, today they also targeted something in Lebanon, and the missile was thwarted. I really don't know what they want in Lebanon, but definitely they want havoc all over the Middle East. They want to push the Middle East entirely into havoc and into abyss and into big mayhem, because this is what they believe in. They want to bring back the Mahdi, the hidden Mahdi, especially if the whole place will turn into mayhem. And this is why they ignite many more fronts with Qatar, with the Saudis, with the Emiratis, with Bahrain, even with Oman, with Kuwait, whoever they can, they shoot.
No, but what is Israel's objective in this? Is Israel looking at regime change? Are we looking at the nuclear program ending? What is Israel's clearly defined objective?
They want to destroy the world, no less. This is their goal now.
No.
They have now 5 days.
I understood what you said about Iran's goal, but what is Israel's goal in this war?
Well, Israel, first of all, defends itself. More than 90% of the missiles which were launched against Israel were knocked down. This one thing. 10% hit, and definitely we have casualties, but way much less than what we expected. This is one thing. Second thing, we target the leadership of this gang of mullahs who control the terror gang of Iran. We got rid of them, and we liberated the world from their evil. Khamenei, from Khamenei.
So what Mr. Israel Katz has said, essentially, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you there, but what the defense minister said of unequivocal target for elimination, the entire leadership of the Iran, you know, that's going to continue as far as Israel is concerned, despite whatever Trump says about not attacking the energy infrastructure and civilian infrastructure.
No, we are coordinated with Trump. Don't get it wrong. We are fully coordinated with Trump. Netanyahu and Trump have almost every day a phone call. The crews are working together, and we are with the United States hand by hand in order to get rid of the terrorists who took over Iran 47 years ago.
Okay, Hamid Reza, I want you to respond to that. It's nothing but mayhem and havoc that Iran wants to cause in the entire Middle East. That's the perception of the Lieutenant Colonel. Do you agree with that? And what is a possible off-ramp? Because if US is started off by, as a measure, President Trump, in fact, saying that they're willing to stop attacking the energy infrastructure, so on and so forth, what's the possible solution to this? Because at some point of time, the fighting will have to stop. Both sides will have to compromise.
Well, calling a democratically elected government who has been to power with their vote of people a terrorist group is a grave mistake that your guest and many others are making, because they are following double standards and they are following their own narratives. So if democracy is important, Iran is elected by people and the regime has been appointed by the people, and it is following its what it needs to do. And right now, it is defending its territory and defending its sovereignty. So it is based on the international law, which of course the Americans and Israelis do not pay any attention to that, and they understand, they consider themselves beyond the law. But international law asks and allows Iran to protect its people and to defend itself. And it was Americans and Israelis who attacked Iran from the day one, and they made this place in this region insecure. And now Iran is protecting the region. Iran is creating the security for the region. And the Strait of Hormuz is, by chance, by incidents, close to Iran, next to Iranian border. And Iran has a rule over the Strait of Hormuz, and it's just practicing that. Iran is responsible for the security of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has owned the right to control the Strait of Hormuz because it is its own waters. So yes, Iran setting some rules. And that is the way out of this correct situation. But if any lessons trades in Chinese RMB yuan, they can pass through. If they are not supporting the Americans and Israelis, they can pass through.
Okay.
If they pay tariffs for that, they can pass through. So Iran is setting the rules, and it is the Americans and Israelis and the whole world that should obey that if they want to passage through that. This is not terrorism. This is not mayhem. This is not chaos. This is ruling according to the international law.
But Bob, I will of course put all your questions to the US panelists over here. But Hamid Reza, here's the problem. The problem is not when you talk about terrorism, it's not about the current conflict itself. But there is a history of support to Hamas and Hezbollah, which the world looks at as kind of support to terrorist groups.
Of course, they are supporting their countries. Let's remember, Hamas is supporting the Palestinians against Israeli asserting occupation. Hezbollah is fighting against Israelis.
But why does Iran support them?
Southern Lebanon. And right now they have occupied parts of southern Lebanon. Iran is fighting against Americans who have occupied Afghanistan, Iraq, and they are using the lands of Arab countries against Iran. So change the narrative, change the mindset that whatever the Americans do is right, and whatever the Iranians do is right, and that's all. Just look at the international law. If you look at the international law as a logic that is supposed to be accepted by the whole world, then you see that Iran is doing the right thing. Iran is defending the groups that are defending their countries. Hezbollah is defending its country, Shaabi is defending its country, and Hamas is defending its own land. Israelis have occupied that land more than 7 years ago.
Let me take this question right back. Let me take this question right back to Dr. Jeffrey Gunter. Of course, some of those questions remain unanswered, but Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, the simple question is this. The fact is that Iran has a huge sway over the manner in which Strait of Hormuz is governed, the security of that entire region. And this is something the US should have factored in when they went ahead and invaded Iran. Clearly, the kind of reactions that we're seeing, the lukewarm response from EU as well as the GCC countries to Trump's calls of the last few weeks, all of this shows that none of this was actually thought out in great detail as it perhaps should have been.
It was thought out incredibly well. Like the art of war, victorious warriors win, then they go to war. This is probably one of the most successful military operations in the history of warfare. You don't believe me? Imagine if we decapitated Adolf Hitler at the onset of the false flag invasion in Poland. It would have saved tens of millions of lives. You don't agree with me? Go ask Soleimani. You don't agree with me? Talking about Lebanon? Go ask Nasrallah. Go ask Haniya. Go ask all their terrorists. They are dead, and they are gone, and they are eliminated. And I can promise you, Israel and the United States will continue to eliminate terrorists until we find someone who will free the Iranian people.
There are two problems with that. There are two problems with that, Ambassador.
Why did they slaughter 40,000 of their own people?
I agree with you that initial days, US was able to take out a lot of big names. There's no doubt about it. But it hasn't gone the way that US would have wanted. The regime continues to attack in the neighborhood all of these countries where US has military bases. Point number one. And point number two, when President Trump yesterday said that these peace talks are going on, Iran has outrightly rejected them, which is leading many to wonder whether he just made that statement for the market sentiment.
No, or Iran made the comment because they don't want to look weak, which will further threaten the regime. Come on, guys. War is the art of deception. And you have to understand, you all were saying that the world was going to explode 2 days ago, and now we're into peace negotiations. President Trump is a brilliant negotiator. You take a strong position, and then you work your way to where you want to be. And I have to say, I'm wondering whether your advocate for Iran here is AI or real, because there's certainly a lack of reality when someone is calling Iran the greatest terrorist sponsor state in the world, a great democracy, who happens to slaughter 40,000 of their own people, by the way. So, I can appreciate having alternative views on the show, but your speaker actually has an alternative.
Well, I can assure you he is anything but AI. He's a very real person, and he's joining us live from Tehran at the moment. But let me quickly bring in Sushant on the point that you made as far as US's success is concerned. Sushant, is becoming a bit unreal. The fact is that Trump appears to be in a bit of a panic mode. He's changed his rhetoric drastically. He's reaching out. He's called up Prime Minister Modi today. And perhaps that's welcome. I mean, the world welcomes the fact that there are peace overtures being made. But to look at it or build this up as some kind of victory is quite far from what the ground reality is. Oil prices universally are impacting on countries, even on countries like US, which is an oil producer.
So, Madhav, a couple of things. Look, have the Americans caused enormous destruction and devastation in Iran? Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about it. They've attacked the Iranian Navy. They've taken out any number of targets. You can't question that, right? But have they made Iran bend to their will? And I don't see clear evidence of that. Now, look, before the war started, and I'm not making this up, this is published information, Trump's special envoy expressed a lot of surprise, or said Trump was expressing a lot of surprise that the Iranians had not capitulated simply because he had amassed the forces on Iran's borders. After that, you again see that Trump himself says that, look, I never expected that the Iranians are going to hit the Arab countries or they are going to close the Straits of Hormuz. Yes, this was discussed, but we never thought this is in the realm of possible. So the Iranians have actually upped the ante. But for the Iranians to argue that by blocking the Straits of Hormuz, now if they were to argue that this is military strategy that they are adopting, perfectly, I can't question that. They are in the middle of a war, they will do what it takes. But for them to argue that they are doing this according to international law is absolutely ridiculous. Blocking the Straits of Hormuz or taking money for passage through an international waterway. This is not a domestic waterway. It's an international waterway which you are deliberately blocking for military purposes. I'm sorry, this is not within international law. You're completely violating it, and there's no two ways about it. But I can understand they're doing it simply because they are in the middle of a war. They will use whatever leverage they can find. But for the Americans to argue that they have actually have brought the Iranians to their knees. I don't think that is, at least I've not seen any evidence of that. If tomorrow something was to work out, we don't know, but as of now, it doesn't look like it.
And that's what, Adrian, you have to answer. I want Adrian to answer that question, because Adrian, whatever you may have done in 3 weeks, one thing that has not diminished is Iran's capability to attack in the neighborhood and also send out missiles, which perhaps may have been intercepted all the way to Mauritius, to the Diego Garcia Islands. The point is the threat from Iran is still very real. They're still taking out F-35s and other sophisticated equipment, even mid-air refuelers. So that threat from Iran continues to remain.
Yeah, it remains, but it's significantly diminished if you look at the actual percentages of what's being launched and what they're launching. They're using ballistic missiles packed with cluster munitions, probably because there's a shortage. They're going to run into a supply issue with the weapons that they wreak havoc. And let me get this straight here. Launching a missile into Bahrain, into Kuwait, and hitting residential neighborhoods, high skyscrapers, those things, that's an act of terror. So they will continue to try.
It's not like civilian and residential buildings in Tehran and other parts of Iran have not been hit. So I don't think any side can, take the higher moral ground when it comes to a war like this, because the evidence is there for all of us to see, Adrian. I don't think there's a higher moral ground over here. Energy infrastructure has been hit on both sides. Civilians have been hit on both sides. And perhaps that's the saddest part of a war like this. We'll have to leave it there. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Sushant Sareen, Dr. Hamid Reza Ghulamzadeh, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Ambassador Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, Adrian Calamel, thanks so much for joining us.